It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
You know, it's amazing to hear the Democrats and the media and some Republicans talk about the threat that Donald Trump is to democracy, our Constitution, when it's the opposite. The opposite. Within our ranks, members of Congress, members of the Democrat Party, isolationists, fake MAGA, they're plotting every day to destroy our principles, our country. And I do include fake MAGA, the isolationists. And they are now being promoted by left-wing corporate media. They say MAGA's divided. MAGA's not divided. Conservatives are divided. Conservatives are not divided. It's the New York Times and other publications who cling on to one reprobate or another. It's a relatively small cabal. But they're part of the problem, as are the Marxists and the Islamists. They're part of the problem. They don't believe in America first. They don't embrace our principles. They don't embrace the fact that we were on the right side of World War II, or the right side of the Civil War, that is the Union. I want to play some clips for you, and then I want to address this. This was taking place on Labor Day. And I hope you had a great weekend. They're always too short, aren't they? Take 3 days, you want 4. Take off a week, you want another week. I get it. But we start with somebody really who should not even be in the House of Representatives, and a long time ago would never have been, likely would have been expelled. Because she's part of the enemy within. Not merely because she's an Islamist who embraces Hamas and other such organizations and the like, but she wants to destroy our country. That was the purpose of this event at the People's Conference for Palestine. I guess it was Sunday, rather, not Monday. Cut 1, Mr. Producer, go.
Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. Y'all, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, Ya Jama'ah, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this room's mother. We ain't going anywhere.
Rashida Tlaib. Cut 2 also.
As an American, this city taught me that the political structures that I have to work in, that we all are surrounded by, was built on slavery and genocide and rape and oppression. Detroit taught me that these institutions will never save us. Detroit will remind me constantly, the community mothers, that it's not the genocide-enabling Congress or the White House that will free our people. It is only us. It can only be us.
So this is the Hate America crowd. She is a second-generation Palestinian. Her parents came here from there. Omar is a first-generation Islamist. But it's not just them. It's the Bernie Sanders of the world. So there's people who've been born here, people who've been imported here, the Marxists and the Islamists. And I've warned you over the long course of my career about these entities, these ideologies. I spent some time this afternoon going through some of my older books. I went through Ameritopia, and I went through American Marxism, believe it or not, which is 4 years old. Ameritopia is 13 years old. Went through my new book on power. Just got me to doing a lot of thinking about these people, and I want to continue so you know what's taking place, because the media are barely covering this. And they ought to cover it rather than endorse it. The next speaker at the People's Conference that I'm going to play, we will continue to globalize the intifada. Huwaida Araf. Huwaida Araf. Cut 3, go.
We wanted to globalize the intifada, to expose to the world that Israel's policies have nothing to do with security, that Israel tries to tell the world, and that our government also regurgitate, gaslighting us. We thought that if we could get this message out, the world would wake up and not allow Israel to do this, to do what it's doing. And I must admit, that was a bit of naivete on our part. But we have and we will continue to globalize the intifada. And we will force our governments to listen to us, because they want us to accept a world that is unacceptable.
Words unacceptable, but in any event, globalize the intifada means globalize terrorism. Hatim Bazian, we've talked about him in the past. He's the founder of Students for Justice in Palestine. He is a professor out in California. And this organization also has ties to organizations that promote terrorism or are in fact involved in it. That's how shocking it's become that these people present themselves. They brag about who they are and what they are. They have large meetings, usually surreptitiously, but here publicly, it's like another day watching football or baseball. Cut 2, go.
Gaza
Cut 4,
should be the focal point on campus. My campus is Gaza. In campus are Gaza. The library is Gaza. The research is Gaza. And we need to connect it to every part of the struggle. Martin Luther King says in the 1960s, 3 evils society: militarism, materialism, and racism. These can be re-understood in relation to Gaza as well as transnationally. The time is today for a free Palestine. The time is today to liberate the university. The time is today for decolonization.
All right, so this is Marxism and Islamism in 1 40-second soundbite. Liberate the university, in other words, take them over. Decolonization, that's the United States, we're the colonizers. And free Palestine, which means destroy Israel and all the Jews within it. This guy is a very dangerous man. Talib is a very dangerous person. Sean Eren, E-R-E-N, Students for Justice in Palestine, Steering Committee member. Cut 5, go.
Movements never exist in a vacuum, of course. We all understand this. But oftentimes we think of them, or the tactical progression of them, as sort of siloed instances of political history. And I just want to interrogate that, because I think that there's worthwhile material in seeing the legacy and the lineage that the student intifada followed that can help us understand what our tasks are, why we've failed, right? Why this is month 23 of a genocide that should never have begun in the first place. So just like we say that, the genocide and displacement and colonization of Palestine didn't begin on October 7th, the organization, the tactical development, the strategy, all of these things about the Palestine movement, especially in the US, as we're all here, also didn't start on October 7th. We're embedded in a political legacy that that sort of encapsulates all types of struggles. We learn from different struggles. We incorporate learnings and teachings from different struggles that we have experienced or observed in past and recent history. And I think that gives us a lot of content to work into our political strategy and a lot of ideas.
This is an entire poison spreading throughout our society. From the Marxists and the Islamists and the anti-Semitic fake MAGA isolationists, a cabal. They claim to be populist, nationalist, and conservative. They're none of those things. They're more Islamist and Marxist. Susceptibility, speaker. Cut 6, go.
We have to destroy the idea of America in our heads, in our neighbors' heads, in our comrades' heads, in everybody's heads in this country. We have to work towards problematizing and getting away from the normalization of the violence of the military-industrial complex that is just baked into these supply chains. And we have to actually present an alternative that is appealing and meaningful to people.
Mm-hmm. Comrades. Notice he said our comrades. This is a complete fusion, as I wrote in American Marxism. One more, and we'll take a break, and then I'll do some talking about all of this. Cut 7 at this conference. Go.
Gaza needs to be saved now. It saved all of us, liberated all of us. It is time for us to pay back.
Okay, let us be clear. These are all people supporting monstrous terrorism and terrorists and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the whole thing. And the isolationists don't want us to fight them, don't want us to stand up to them. They want us to take whatever they have to serve, these people, against us. They're usurping our country. They're undermining us from within. They are the enemy within. You can hear them, how they move from attacking Israel to attacking the United States. Again, I've told you about this over and over again, how they dehumanize you and me, how they use Martin Luther King, who would be appalled at what these people are doing and have done. Go ahead.
The criminals, the perpetrators, the child murderers, and we all know who they are. We all know who they are, whether they are in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Washington, in Germany, in Europe. We all know them.
Meaning the whole West. The whole West is the enemy. Israel, the United States, Europe, the entire West. These are the words of the terrorist so-called scholars. Go ahead.
They need to be locked up. They need to be taken out. They need to be neutralized.
They need to be locked up and taken out. Locked up, taken out. Notice also there was no violence targeted against these people. None. Notice, though, if Jews gather in one place, there's almost always violence targeted against Jews. I'm just pointing it out. Go ahead.
Children, to save children, to save the humanity. We are not saying this out of hate. We are saying this out of love for the children, love for life, love for humanity, where every life is equal.
That's enough. He finally remembered the taglines, that they're for love and children and humanity and life. That's after he said about taking us out. Taking us out. You know, ladies and gentlemen, there's a big part of the world that's controlled by the Marxists. Big part of the world controlled by the Islamists. A lot of people being slaughtered. And the Arabs. A lot of people being slaughtered. But you see, that's our fault. It's Israel's fault. It's Europe's fault. I don't know what else to do, but this is an extraordinarily dangerous cancer that is metastasizing in the West and in our own country.
Mark Levin. making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
So wherever Marxism has been tried, it has resulted in impoverishment, inhumanity of the worst kind. And so we're always told, well, that's the wrong person, Stalin and Mao, and it's never really been tried. So I wrote that 13 years ago. But I want to say something now that is not intended to be controversial, but I know it will be, and it'll be exploited and misstated. But let me be clear. We have people who keep telling us what America's youth believe. We have people who run organizations that are focused on colleges. We have young people who form their own little groups, and they go on TV. Then we have older people telling us what young people believe. First of all, young people, that's a very nebulous term. What does that mean? And it amazes me that people claim to speak for all these young people. They claim to speak for everyone. Well, they don't speak for anybody. They form groups. They tell the groups what to think. And then they tell you what the groups think, which is really to advance their own ideology and agenda. And we see this all across the board. But let me tell you now what I think. As somebody who spent most of my life studying history and writing about it and talking about it, and then let me make clear that I'm not talking about every young person, because there are young people in this country who serve in the military, who serve as police and firefighters, put their lives and their welfare on the line. There are young people who work hard every day and try to make a living and follow the law and pay their taxes. The young people who fail, but they get up and they fight again. In other words, there's young people in this country who conduct themselves like American youth have always conducted themselves. But there's apparently a big swath who do not. And so they find appealing the Marxist propaganda, which even the Islamists use, that if you're not achieving, it's not your fault. That if you're not achieving, it's the fault of the system. That if you're not achieving, it's capitalism. It's not you. You don't have any responsibilities. You have a right to have your education subsidized, the birth of your children subsidized, your food subsidized, your transportation subsidized, your housing subsidized, if not for free. Those are your rights. I mean, after all, we have billionaires in this country, against whom you should be proselytizing, should be very upset. Look what they've stolen from you. Look what the older generation has stolen from you. Look at what capitalism has done to you. This is all dressed up Marxism, of course, for a tyrannical, totalitarian, centralized police state. Climate change. Look at how American industry is destroying your future. It's existential. It's worse than war itself. And so we literally have millions of young people. Again, I stress, not all, but millions, and that's enough. Who believe that they're owed whatever they want. That they should be whatever they want because it's equality or it's a right. And somebody else is responsible for them to get there. And if they don't get there, it's the fault of the other person or the other groups of people or the system. These are the individuals, not all, but millions, who don't dust themselves off and decide, you know what? I'm responsible for myself. I have the freedom to determine what I'm going to be and how I'm going to be. It's either their parents' fault or their grandparents' fault or government's fault or history's fault. You can't afford a home? Well, we have to destroy the city to make sure you can, says Mondani. Food's too expensive? Well, we'll make it cheaper just by nationalizing it or taking it over. Fuel's too expensive? And I could go down the list here. Life is a challenge. Life is an everyday challenge. With freedom comes hard work, accountability, responsibility, individualism. Your freedom ought not require somebody else's enslavement. That is, your freedom shouldn't require somebody else to pay higher taxes to subsidize you in an economic perspective. Or this whole system shouldn't be turned inside out because of you. It's much easier for those who are lazy of mind and body to attack the successful. They're not really successful, you see. It's unequal. They're oppressors. They've used the system. The system's always been bastardized, you see. The system has always been racist. It's always been bigoted. I would be something. I will have already accomplished something. I will already been a great poet or a wealthy person or a great painter or whatever. But for the fact that, fill in the blank. If I can't afford something, a house, I have a right to a house. So something's wrong. If I can't afford to get a master's degree, then something's wrong because I want a master's degree. If I can't afford, fill in the blank, it's not me. It doesn't mean I should change course. It doesn't mean maybe I did something wrong and should be a little circumspect and maybe figure that out. No. It's the billionaire down the street. It's capitalism. It's Donald Trump. It's my parents. It's my grandparents. It's something else. It's not me. Now, this is a very dangerous and sick psychology for a society. Because what's happening more and more, the uniqueness of this society, freedom, let's take that, number one, is being used against itself. That phrase, you're free to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and make something of yourself, is now mocked. Well, I can't. Why? Because the system's against me, because of my race, because of my sexuality, because of God knows what, because of the climate, because of the environment. And I fear this is what's going on. And this is why so many young people are susceptible to Marxism and Islamism, because they pretend to have the answers. Islamism doesn't have the answers. And the evidence is in the way people live under it or die. Marxism doesn't have the answers. Same reason. The way people live under it or die. Every one of these societies are impoverished in every respect. In every respect. What you see going on in our country could never go on in a Marxist country, could never go on in an Islamist country or an Islamist group, ever. You have people who have now in some ways successfully characterized themselves as the oppressed, characterized themselves as the righteous, as the liberators, when in fact they're just garden variety thugs. Violent, monstrous thugs. And we are destroying ourselves. We're destroying ourselves. The people with this mindset populate a significant percentage of our lifetime federal appointed judges. Our entire college and university system is overwhelmed with faculty and administrators that push this kind of thinking on our young people, which is why there's such a distinction between the views of people who are in an older generation and a younger generation. Again, there are exceptions. There always will be and there always are, but that's not my point. You have people going to the White House and they're telling the president, people I know, the president has told me, saying, you know, Mr. President, because of the way Israel is fighting, young people are turning on Israel and they're becoming anti-Semitic. This is from people who are promoting anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel. And it's more than that. When it comes here directly to the United States, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, how the media serve as a voice for this ideology. Even some conservative media believe they have to balance, quote unquote, their reporting with this stuff. I fear that if we ever need a draft, if there's ever a full-out war with the Communist Chinese, and they outnumber us 5-1 in terms of people, and if there's ever a draft, we'll have the greatest resistance to a draft in the history of this country. People flooding into Canada or somewhere else. I truly wonder if many, not all, but many of these people would have fought in World War II. What would their position be in the American Revolutionary War? I truly wonder. Because here's the truth. Ready for the next one, Mr. Producer? The vast majority of young people in this country have never had it so good. By the way, like the vast majority of people who aren't that young, but I'm focused in on this generation. The vast majority have never had it so good. There hasn't been a draft. There's no requirement for government service of the sort that is patriotic. I'm not talking about joining the civil service or a public sector union, or I'm talking about, requirements of that sort. They've never been more subsidized, this generation, than past young generations. Never. And I'm worried about it. Very worried about it. They're very vulnerable as a result of all of this. Very, very vulnerable. Vulnerable to the Marxists and the Islamists. Very vulnerable. And in their heart of hearts and in their mind of minds, They become vulnerable to other things. Drugs, reckless lifestyles, potentially. Fewer and fewer young people are people of faith. Again, many are. I'm talking about those who are not. But fewer and fewer are. And that's a problem, because that's where we get our morality from, not government, not from TV, not from the news. Anyway, I thought I needed to lay it out.
Mark Levin. You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
The big question to be answered is whether or not President Xi of China will mention the massive amount of support and blood that the United States of America gave to China in order to help it to secure its freedom from a very unfriendly foreign invader. And by that he means our defeat of Japan in World War II. Many Americans died in China's quest for victory and glory. I hope they're rightfully honored and remembered for their bravery and sacrifice. May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America. President Donald J. Trump. He's right about that, isn't he? Oh, yeah. He understands what's going on fully and completely. President at the White House today, cut one, go.
I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two. I think that we helped China very much, as you know, when they talk about freedom. And I don't believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe that America, that the United States was acknowledged for helping China to gain its freedom. But perhaps I was just that was a sleight of hand. I mean, I was very surprised. I watched the speech last night. President Xi is a friend of mine, but I thought that the United States should have been mentioned last night during that speech because we helped China very, very much.
Mm-hmm. We sure did. Cut two. Go ahead.
You've expressed many times your frustration and disappointment with Putin, but there's no action since you took your office. Don't you worry that...
How do you know there's no action?
But don't you worry... What actions did you take? I'm with Polish radio.
Okay. How do you know there's no action? Would you say that putting secondary sanctions on India, the largest purchaser outside of China, they're almost equal, would you say there was no action? That cost hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia. You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job, because if you remember 2 weeks ago I said if India buys, India's got big problems, and that's what happened. So don't tell me about that.
You know, it's interesting to me. Donald Trump is taking firm action, and he's going to take firmer action. He's ratcheting it up, trying to see what kind of response he gets. And if there's resistance with this alliance, and they keep pounding Ukraine, and they keep threatening the West, he's going to keep ratcheting it up. So it's like he can't win. He's got the isolationist nut jobs who would have us surrender to this enemy, all the enemies. And then he's got the media and the left that say he's not doing enough, and yet he's done a ton more than Joe Biden ever did. I mean, ask yourselves that question. He's done a ton more to support NATO. He's doing a ton more now to support Ukraine. He's the one that's trying to step in and get that situation resolved. He's done a ton more to support the state of Israel. He's done a ton more to build up our own military and secure our own border. And yet it is this constant ripping at him. Cut 3, go.
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
So we have one group, seriously, of loudmouths who believe we should just surrender navigable waters, surrender the economy, surrender our allies to our enemies. And you know who these bird brains are. And then we have these others who seem trigger happy. Now, Trump will pull the trigger if and when he needs to, but he's not trigger happy. This is what I've explained over and over and over again. He's not an isolationist, but he's not an interventionist. And neither was Reagan. Peace through strength means peace through strength. They're not blind to these threats. Now, some people will say he pushed China, North Korea, and Russia towards each other. Ladies and gentlemen, China, North Korea, and Russia in the last several decades have been aligned. They've been aligned. There's no surprise about it. None. Now, in the case of India, Modi seems to be willing to befriend whomever he feels he needs to befriend, but I don't think he's playing his cards smart. I really don't. He was standing there with Xi and Putin, and he seemed ultra uncomfortable, as he should. As he should, because they were also standing there with Pakistan and other countries that are not democracies. India is the biggest democracy on the face of the planet. China has been a sworn enemy. There may be a period of quiet right now, but it's certainly not going to be for a long period of time. So Modi's kind of out there now and has to really think about what he's doing. Really think about what he's doing. But on the one hand, he's called a dictator, trigger happy. On the other hand, he's not doing enough. I've been thinking about this. It's like trying to help the cities. You have a president who is actively trying to protect the citizenry of Democrat cities, most of whom are minorities and most of whom are black among the minorities. And he's under full-throated attack by the Democrat Party, by minority organizations, by activists. He could step away. He could say, let the blood keep pouring in the streets. He can keep pretending that the Democrats are right about gun control. You have Durbin out there who says, problem with guns in Chicago is most of them are coming from outside the city. There was a report just a few hours before this program that said actually most of the guns are coming out of Chicago. They can't control that any more than they control other sorts of things that come into the city or are in the city. Law and order means law and order, protecting people. And the Democrats refuse to do it. They are pushed, pulled, cajoled, threatened, bullied by the Marxist Islamist axis. They will never be supporters of the cops, never. Name one mayor who's a supporter of the cop who's a liberal Democrat. Name one. There are none. Their big sugar daddy, Soros, is busy funding prosecutors who won't prosecute. Their judges, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, are completely out of control at the federal level. They're at it again. They're at it again. You have a federal judge in Boston appointed by a radical Democrat president who, before I came on the air, ruled that the president doesn't have the authority to negotiate or fine Harvard $2 billion, Mr. Producer. Did you see that? It's unbelievable. You have another federal Democrat judge in L.A. that says the president does not have the authority to bring in the National Guard to protect ICE. Got that one? You have another federal judge that ruled a woman who threatened to murder Donald Trump should be released. So he released her. as she threatened with postings online. This guy Bozoberg, completely out of control Obama judge. You have another judge, I should say court, 2-1, 2 Democrats versus 1 Republican. That ruled that the statute relied on by the president from the 1800s doesn't apply. Therefore, a whole slew of individuals who are here illegally cannot be deported under that statute. Now, these are decisions, 6, 7, 8 of them, that have come down in the course of the last 48 hours. And clearly the Democrats. And then, of course, we have the big one on the tariffs. If you oppose tariffs, then your place to go is Congress. Congress. Not the courts. And there was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal by Professor Jonathan Adler of William and Mary Law School, basically agreeing with me in the post that I placed on social media last week and read to you on the air, which essentially agrees with the dissent. That opinion was 7-4. But he made the point, I made the point, that tariffs are not just about economics, they're about foreign policy. They affect foreign governments, foreign corporations, foreign policy, national security. And in many of the cases where Donald Trump has issued executive orders, that's exactly what he focused on. It's not a matter of Congress delegating authority it cannot delegate to a president. Even there, as the professor wrote, and I said, and the dissent said, even there, even then, we have a long history, almost from the beginning of the Republic, where Congress has authorized a president broad authority to make determinations about tariffs. So the president is not acting outside his legal or constitutional authority, despite what our friends say at National Review. He's not. And so there's a debate on this. Just as he's not acting outside his authority on the flag, a 5-4 1989 decision, as I explained that decision in the president's executive order, his executive order does not violate the Constitution. It follows the 1989 ruling of the Supreme Court. And what's happening here, the problem isn't the president. The problem is all of these radical left-wing lawyers, whether they have been judges or lawyers for left-wing groups or Democrat activists, they were pushed into the court by Schumer to thwart Trump. And that's what they're trying to do. And they're back at it, round 2. We've had 2 speeches by 2 justices, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, warning the lower courts, even since the court ruled late last spring, early summer, that the lower courts are not adhering to the authority of the Supreme Court. Why? Because they're radicals in robes. Radicals in robes. And they're not going to adhere to the Supreme Court any more than they're going to adhere to federal law and the Constitution. This is a grave threat to the Republic, grave threat to this Republic. Terrible. I underscored this yesterday. All right, I want to address briefly the Epstein matter. And we have a couple of congressmen, Republicans and Democrats, who say we want to get to the bottom of this matter, release all documents and so forth. I ask, what is the bottom of the matter? What is it? Again, what is the end game here, Mr. Producer? Let's see, where's the cut here? Play cut 6, please.
I do have to ask, and I know, and it's just something that I think we're compelled to at this moment, with the attention on President Trump, with these questions around a pardon. Did anybody see or hear of the president himself doing anything inappropriate as it related to Jeffrey Epstein?
No. No.
Or former President Clinton?
No.
No. These are Epstein survivors that were on Capitol Hill who testified on MSNBC. That's Haley Jackson asking the question about Trump and Clinton. Did any of you survivors see anything untoward by them? No and no. So what is the end game here? I'm still curious. What is it? The guy killed himself, and that's good. But what is it?
Mark Levin. The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Well, I want to draw your attention, if you're a Democrat, if you're in the media, if you're an Islamist or an isolationist, if you're a Marxist or just a Jew hater, I am posting, as I speak, on all my social sites, video for you, 1:41 seconds, of Hamas terrorists torturing and beating Gazan civilians at a market with sticks and iron bars simply because they took food without Hamas's approval. Why doesn't the international media ever share this? Will this be on any cable news program? Will it? Will this be on any Sunday program? Will it? If the shoe were on the other foot, you better believe it would be. Isn't this worth watching? I think it is. And I'm posting it for you because who else will if I don't? Oh, here's another story that was not reported by any major news outlet, network, cable, the Slimes, the Compost, any of them. Any of them. You have to go to the Jerusalem Post, and it's not even a Jerusalem Post study. New study debunks Gaza genocide claims, finds flaws in UN international reporting on the war. Wow, now you would think that's important, wouldn't you? You would think the upcoming Sunday shows are all prepared, sharpening their teeth, right? Narratives about Israel committing genocide, war crimes, and a deliberate mass starvation in an ongoing war in Gaza have been challenged and in some cases debunked in a comprehensive study published on Wednesday titled Debunking the Genocide Allegations, a re-examination of the Israel-Hamas War 2023 to 2025. The study, published by the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, engaged in a critical analysis to challenge the narrative of Israeli genocide during the conflict by analyzing humanitarian reporting and casualty data. Please don't let the facts get in the way. Spanning 311 pages, the study also used quantitative analysis and forensic documentation, oh, that's too confusing, to examine and contest widely reported claims from international organizations and courts. Now, wouldn't you be interested in this if you just did a story saying that the Jews are committing genocide? Don't you think Tlaib and her ilk at the People's Conference of Marxists, Islamists, and other monsters would want to know this? Led by Professor Danny Orbach, the authors said their objective was to provide a factual analysis rather than a legal or moral exoneration. The publication of the study arrives at a crucial time as the IDF is poised to begin the Gideon's Chariots 2 invasion of Gaza City. And as the International Association of Genocide Scholars, now I read to you last night what a whistleblower said, what a setup, what a bunch of phony fraud freaks that is. Adopted a resolution on Monday which says the Israeli military actions in Gaza Strip meet the legal definition of genocide. Divided into 8 chapters, each section of the study addressed specific allegations and themes related to the conflict and its reporting. The overarching themes Yes, that emerged from the research were a critique of humanitarian reporting, a reevaluation of casualty data, and he called for a new methodological framework for analyzing conflicts. Perhaps the study's most controversial finding, they write, concerns food supply in Gaza. The researchers said that more food entered Gaza during the war than before the war. Hello! More food entered Gaza during the war than before October 7, 2023. A claim that starkly contradicts widespread reports of imminent famine and deliberate starvation of the Gazan population on Israel's part. Now, maybe somebody ought to look at that video that I just posted. According to the study, the frequently cited requirement of 500 aid trucks entering Gaza daily stems from what the authors called a misrepresentation by UN bodies. They point to pre-war UN records showing an average of only 73 food trucks per day in 2022. The 500 figure has been regularly cited throughout the war by the UN, as well as international media outlets such as CNN, The Guardian, and The Washington Post. Well, aren't they all swell reporting mechanisms? Until October 17, 2025, GOGAT, the Israeli Defense Ministry's military body coordinating activities in the territories, recorded on average 101 food trucks daily, while retroactively corrected but incomplete UNRWA data indicated 83 food trucks daily. In a similar vein, the study said the food that entered Gaza during the ceasefire should have sufficed until late July 2025, according to the UN World Food Programme's projections. The researchers attributed the gap between projected sufficiency and reported shortage to, let's guess, quote, extensive looting by Hamas. You know, Hamas, the terrorist group supported by CARE, the terrorist group supported by Tlaib and Omar, the terrorist group supported by Students for Justice in Palestine, isn't that funny, and the Marxists. They also disputed claims regarding Gaza's agricultural self-sufficiency, contrary to allegations that 44% of Gaza's food comes from local agriculture, the study said. This figure was absolutely baseless. The academics calculated that Gaza's agriculture likely accounted for no more than 12% of caloric consumption in 2005. Yes. Goes on. Let's see here. I'm just trying to cut through some of it. What's more, stick with me. The authors also made the point to strongly criticize the decision to stop aid to Gaza, which the Israelis had done to pressure the release of hostages. Further, the study took aim at casualty figures reported by the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, alleging systematic data manipulation. Now, this is like the fifth report that's done that. And yet, CNN, MSNBC, the kooks in Congress and the rest, they keep using it. Because why? Because it promotes their narrative. According to the researchers, the health ministry, per Hamas's directives, categorizes all deaths as civilian deaths. That, the analysts found, significantly skewed international reporting. For their indications, the ministry's lists included age-related natural deaths, particularly women, while failing to indicate combat-aged men who were killed. This selective reporting, they argued, artificially inflates civilian casualty figures and obscures the actual... Now, this has been proven before, but it's ignored. As of March 2025, the Gaza Health Ministry had reported over 50,000 combat-related casualties. The study noted the number of reported widows at nearly 14,000, almost matched the official excess male mortality figure of nearly 14,000 for ages 18 to 59, which it found striking. So they're saying 14,000 women died of natural causes. Age. Moreover, the authors presented data suggesting that evacuation zones designed by the IDF were significantly safer than other areas. According to their partial data analysis, less than 4% of deaths occurred in these areas. They attributed higher casualties elsewhere to the failure of the UN to cooperate with the establishment of such zones. A substantial portion of the study focused on what authors described as systematic failures of UN and non-governmental organization NGO reporting. They identified patterns of circular citation, opaque assessments, and unannounced retroactive corrections that the researchers said have distorted the international understanding of the conflict. One example they highlighted involves UNRWA, again the UN. Their truck count discrepancies. While UNRWA initially reported a 70% drop in aid after May 2024 and the Rafah operation, the agency, quote, later retroactively corrected these reports. But they didn't tell anybody. Crucially, the authors noted this correction was effectively unannounced, and hence the supposed aid drop continues to be broadly cited. That is, the old figures. Separately, the study drew parallels to past conflicts, noting a precedent in flawed reporting from the 2008-2009 Gaza war. They cited former UN jurist Richard Goldstone, who led the UN fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict and later expressed regret over some of his report's conclusions. In a 2011 Washington Post op-ed, Goldstone wrote, "If I had known then what I know now, the Goldstone report would have been a different document," because he took the phony data from Hamas. The study extended its analysis beyond Gaza as well, examining similar patterns in Iraq during the UN Security Council's 1990 sanctions regime. Per the authors, claims of hundreds of thousands of child deaths due to sanctions based on Iraqi government data were later revealed to be fabricated by the Iraqi authorities. Introducing a new theoretical concept called humanitarian bias, the report used this term to characterize what the authors perceived as systematic errors in conflict reporting. They define this as a tendency among aid organizations to accept alarming claims from stakeholders in order to mobilize urgent action. Commensurate with the researchers, this is a bias that creates a feedback loop where factual corrections are often met with hostility or ignored altogether. And that's what you're seeing right now, because this report will be ignored by everyone but me. They added that even when myths are definitively disproven, quote, corrections are rarely incorporated into public or academic understandings. An acute example of this theoretical concept, the study continued, can be seen when the UN aid chief Tom Fletcher falsely stated in May 2025 that some 14,000 Gazan babies could die within the next 48 hours unless aid reached them. Quote, aid has not reached the communities it needs to reach. This is baby food, baby nutrition. There are 14,000 babies who will die in the next 48 hours unless we can reach them, Fletcher told the BBC. Now, when pressed on how he came to this figure, he assured the interviewer the UN had strong teams on the ground formulating these assessments. 2 days later, the United Nations retracted his statement, with officials downplaying the original time frame of the dire situation. The study also mentioned that humanitarian bias can be particularly damaging when it prevents a realistic assessment of the root causes of conflict and humanitarian crises, such as the actions of non-state actors. That's these non-governmental organizations. And it goes on. This is a fantastic report, which will be utterly ignored because it undermines the narrative of genocide and famine being committed by the Israelis. It undermines the radical Marxists and Islamists and Jew haters, whether they be the fake MAGA isolationists, whether they be Marjorie Taylor Greene, whether they be Hamas supporting Tlaib and Omar, and Bernie Sanders, and the other Marxists, even though it gives the lie to their claims. This report will not be noted in Mediaite, Dan Abrams' organization, unless they hear me mentioning it and choose to report it and pretend to prove me wrong, but they haven't reported it yet. Neither is the Drudge Report. Nobody. And it goes on.
Mark Levin. We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
Something remarkable happened at a hearing today. I know that's unusual. Most people won't pick it up. That's okay. I do. Very remarkable. As a matter of fact, we're going to lead off with it. And it's not the Robert Kennedy hearing, although we want to deal with that too. how the Democrats didn't even let the man finish a thought. And but I want to get into some of what was done here with respect to this debate that took place between Ted Cruz and Tim Kaine. It wasn't really a debate. Tim Kaine had left the room, but nonetheless. Let's see here, Mr. Producer. I know I just saw your Tim Kaine cut. All right, here we are. So they're at this hearing today, and Tim Kaine announces, well, rather than me tell you, you got to listen to this. Listen very carefully. Cut 6, go.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling. I think the motto over the Supreme Court is equal justice under law. The oath that you and I take, pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not arbitrarily defined natural rights.
This is stunning. Anybody who's listened to the show for 30 seconds knows how preposterous this is. I'm going to let Ted Cruz provide his answer, which he did. He came into the hearing room. Kaine had already left. And I want to elaborate on this myself. But here's Ted Cruz at the hearing. Cut 7, go.
I would actually encourage observers to go back and listen to what Senator Kaine said, because I have to say it I think was disturbing and showed much of where today's Democrat Party has gone wrong. So Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." I have to say it is stunning to me that the principle that God has given us natural rights is now deemed by Democrats some radical and dangerous notion. Mr. Jefferson was right when he wrote those words. Government exists to protect those rights. But slavery was not okay when U.S. law allowed it. It was wrong then. It is wrong now. It is always wrong.
It is stunning that a United States senator, and not just from any state, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, would make the statement he made, that rights come from government. Anybody who believes that is a Marxist and a buffoon. Now let's break this down. Those of you who have on power know about this already and listen to this program, but it's certainly worthy of emphasizing. Unalienable rights. That's what it says in the Declaration. What does that mean? That you have certain rights from God that are unalienable. There are certain truths that are eternal. Again, I write about this on Power. Tim Kaine rejects the entire founding of the American experiment. The entire founding of the American experiment. He thinks equality, the idea of equality, comes from government. The idea of liberty comes from government. No, that's not where it comes from. Here's what he won't say. It comes from the Judeo-Christian belief system. I've explained that Islamism, as others have pointed out who are Muslim, that Islamism, radical Islamism, is stuck in the 7th century. Hasn't gone through the Reformation. He rejects the Enlightenment. So when Tim Kaine talks about Sharia law, and this is the problem with Sharia law, he's right. But he completely rejects the American founding, which is based on the sovereignty of God, and that sovereignty which is birth to his children on earth. And then the question is, what does all that mean? Which, again, I explain in the book, and I've spent 3.5 months talking about it here. This should shock the hell out of you. And yet it is, in fact, as Ted Cruz says, illustrative of the Democrat Party, a party that clearly rejects America and the American founding. This is why they have no problem with the 1619 Project and no problem destroying our monuments. This is why the Democrat Party is the house of Marxism and Islamism, among other isms. This is why. Tim Kaine doesn't even comprehend how America came to be, or he rejects it, one or the other, both of which are damning. Damning. Your rights come before a government. The idea of free will and liberty came before there was a government in this country. This clown has it backwards. He speaks like the Marxist. And it's his position that is akin to Sharia law. Except his God doesn't come from the Quran. It comes from his own mind. From his own mind. This is why these Democrats are egomaniacal, narcissistic, power-hungry, because they believe they are in charge of determining what your fundamental liberties and rights are. Now, they can destroy them. That's why I wrote the book On Power. But they don't have the slightest idea, or they completely reject the notion that this is bigger than them. Bigger than them. Sharia law is nothing like the law in a constitutional republic. Notice we talk about Judeo-Christian values and morals and beliefs, but we don't talk about Judeo-Christian law. There is no law. There's belief, there's faith, there's values, there's morality, but there is no law. In Sharia, there's law, the most minute law. The imposition of that law on all people, regardless of their faith, or any faith or no faith. That's not Judaism and Christianity. Tim Kaine is a coward. He's a fraud. He's a low IQ moron who's been in government forever. Here's a guy that was Attorney General of Virginia, Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Governor of Virginia, A United States senator now going on I don't know how many decades. And he either doesn't know or doesn't believe in the most fundamental, core, founding principle of our country. That your rights come from him. He's in the government. Your rights come from him. We wonder why so many people are utterly illiterate when it comes to the founding, utterly illiterate when it comes to the Declaration and the Constitution. How many members of Congress think like this man? Either because they're utterly stupid and illiterate, or their ideology is such. I dare say many, particularly in the Democrat Party.